Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive.
Yeah,
Today, we are going to jump right into this.
let's do it.
This is March 27th, 2025.
2025 already.
I know, it's crazy,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So we've got kind of a snapshot of the crypto market for you.
Yep,
We've got some very interesting developments from some familiar players
absolutely.
and some changes in regulation that we'll get into.
Some shifting winds,
Yeah, and also some really big stuff happening overseas.
big time.
So our mission today
Yeah,
is to give you, like, the need to know.
the TLD.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So if we look at the market right now, kind of just a slight dip globally, nothing crazy, but stablecoin volumes are kind of flat,
Huh.
And one thing to think about is President Trump, his proposed tariffs are kind of looming over everything.
Okay, see.
And I think particularly on the stablecoin activity,
Right,
that might put some pressure on things, as we head into the weekend.
right.
We could see some volatility. Okay, well, let's jump right into one of our first big developments here.
Let's do it.
GameStop.
What?
Yeah, GameStop.
No way.
Yeah, so they just announced that they're changing their investment policy
Okay.
to allow them to hold Bitcoin
Yeah.
and select cryptocurrencies as part of their Treasury reserves.
Interesting.
Now, get this. There's no limit to how much they can accumulate,
No limit.
and they can sell whenever they want,
Huh. This sounds familiar.
right? It does sound familiar, doesn't it?
It does.
So if we connect this to kind of the bigger picture, what's going on?
Yeah,
This is very similar to the strategy that we've seen with, like, Michael Saylor.
totally. Yeah.
And companies are increasingly looking at Bitcoin
Mm-hmm.
as something to add to their balance sheets.
Right. And I think it's more than just, diversifying assets.
Right.
I think this move by GameStop really signals that,
Yeah.
traditional companies are getting more and more comfortable
Right.
with holding these assets that,
Yeah.
we still consider to be volatile.
Right.
It's like Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So this could really pave the way for more widespread corporate adoption.
Totally.
And it could influence how investors view companies
Right.
with crypto exposure.
So on the surface, companies, putting Bitcoin on their balance sheets,
Yeah,
it seems like a good thing, right?
it does on the surface.
Yeah. But let's think about it from our listeners' perspective.
Okay.
What are some of the potential downsides here?
Well, I think this raises a really important question about, the future of Bitcoin ownership.
Okay.
If large corporations start to become like the main holders of Bitcoin, you could argue that that's kind of straying from Satoshi's original vision,
Right?
which was to have, this decentralized peer-to-peer digital currency.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, how is the community going to react to this in the long run?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And also, these treasury decisions that companies are making,
Right.
they're not set in stone.
Right.
Future administrations could come in and just reverse them. And that introduces, a level of political uncertainty that could really impact these companies
Right.
and the price of Bitcoin.
That's a great point, and I think that is something that we definitely need to keep in mind.
Absolutely.
So let's switch gears a little bit.
Okay.
There's some really interesting news coming out from the Financial Times.
Okay.
And this is not confirmed yet. So
Yeah.
take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
But it looks like Fidelity.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Fidelity is planning to launch its own stablecoin.
Interesting.
Now, apparently, this is connected to their strategy with tokenized government bonds.
Oh, okay.
They recently filed this on-chain Treasury funding,
Yeah.
which means that they're putting their plans to hold government bonds
Mm-hmm.
directly on the blockchain.
Interesting.
So this is huge.
Yeah.
What's really interesting here is that Fidelity would be entering into a very crowded space.
Right.
We've got Circle with USDC Tether, with USDT.
Big players.
Yeah, these are the big guys. But Fidelity has a massive existing base of institutional clients.
Right.
So their stablecoin could actually function as like digital cash,
Yeah.
specifically designed for these big players.
So it'd be interesting to see how they position it.
Right. And even though it is a crowded space,
Mm-hmm.
Fidelity coming into the game could be a game changer
I think so.
because they have so much trust.
Yeah.
They've experienced navigating regulations,
They've been around forever.
and they could really legitimize and accelerate the use of on-chain digital cash
Yeah, totally.
for these institutions.
Yeah, for big players.
So the question for you,
Yeah.
will this Fidelity stablecoin stay exclusive to institutions, or will we eventually see it available to everyone?
That's a great question.
That's what we need to find out, right?
Keep our eyes peeled.
All right, let's turn our attention to regulations.
Okay.
and some of the shifts we're seeing in the SEC under the Trump administration.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
So we're seeing this play out in a couple of ways. First of all, the SEC dropped their investigation into Immutable.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and if you remember, this investigation started back in October 2024 under the Biden administration with Gary Gensler at the helm.
Yep.
So the fact that it's been halted
Right.
with no enforcement action is a pretty big win for the crypto space,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to digital ownership.
So for our listeners who might not be super familiar with Immutable,
Yeah,
they're a huge player in the world of digital ownership,
they are.
particularly in gaming.
Mm-hmm.
So this has got to be a big deal for them.
It is a validation for them.
Yeah.
And I think for the future of blockchain gaming, this is a very good sign. They're clearly focused on growth.
Yeah.
They're launching their Immutable Play platform.
Right.
They've already passed 1 million passcode signups.
Wow.
And they've said publicly that they welcome clear regulations.
Oh.
Which I think highlights the frustration that a lot of people in crypto felt
Yeah.
with the lack of clear guidelines from the SEC under Gensler.
Right. It seemed like they were just kind of making it up as they went along.
It was a little bit murky.
So having this investigation dropped could mean a more favorable environment for blockchain-based games
Right.
and digital asset ownership.
Totally.
So it seems like this change in administration
Yeah.
is bringing a different tone,
It seems that way.
at least for now.
We'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, but how regulators are interacting with crypto space.
Yeah.
And speaking of long-standing regulatory battles,
Okay.
we've got a big development in the SEC versus Ripple case.
Oh, yeah. Huge.
So a settlement has been announced just the other day, March 25th, 2025.
Wow. Fresh off the press.
And the fine has been reduced to $50 million,
Okay.
down from the initial $125 million.
Still a chunk of change.
It's still a lot of money, but it's a lot less.
It is.
And the money that was being held in escrow will go to the SEC.
Got it.
And this is waiting approval from the judge.
Okay.
So $50 million is still a lot.
It is.
But it's way less than what they were asking for.
Right.
So what impact could this have on Ripple and their XRP token?
Yeah, good question.
It's currently around 2.40,
Okay.
and there's speculation it might even go above $3.
Wow.
So,
Yeah, I think the market is watching this very closely to see how the settlement plays out. And I think to understand this better, we need to take a look back
yeah, I think a little history lesson is in order.
at some of the key milestones in this legal battle.
Absolutely, because it feels like this has been going on forever.
It has been a long time coming.
So let's recap some of those key moments.
Okay, so back on December 21st, 2020,
Yeah, okay.
the SEC sued Ripple Labs, claiming that their sales of XRP were unregistered securities.
Okay.
Basically, they were saying that Ripple didn't follow the rules of the Howey test,
Right.
which determines if an asset is an investment contract.
Right.
So, this caused a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah.
And a week later, Coinbase delisted XRP. But then in March 2021, Judge Netburn ruled that XRP does have currency value and utility,
Okay.
which was a key difference
Okay.
from how Bitcoin and Ethereum were being viewed
Right,
at its
yeah.
time.
So that was a pretty big moment.
It was.
But it wasn't a complete victory for Ripple, was it?
It wasn't a complete win.
Yeah.
Fast forward to July 2023, Ripple got a partial victory.
Okay.
The court said that XRP sold on exchanges to the public
Yeah.
was not a security.
Okay.
But XRP sold directly to institutions was a violation of securities laws.
Okay.
So kind of a mixed bag.
Right.
Then to make things even more complicated around that same time,
Uh-oh.
the Hinman documents were unsealed.
Okay.
And these revealed internal discussions within the SEC about Ethereum.
Huh.
And, this just added fuel to the fire of
Yeah.
debate over how cryptocurrencies should be regulated.
So then there was all this talk about a potential appeal from the SEC.
Yeah, in July 2023, the SEC hinted that they might appeal the ruling. And the deadline for them to do that was October 2024.
Mm-hmm.
But with the change in administration,
Right.
the SEC under Trump decided to drop the appeal
Okay.
on March 25th, 2025, the same day as the settlement.
Wow.
So pending the judge's final approval,
Right.
it looks like this long and dramatic chapter is finally coming to a close,
Okay.
which I think could bring some relief
Yeah.
and hopefully some clarity to the market.
Right. So that was a lot of history.
It was a long road.
But I think it was important to go over
Totally.
because it gives context to how significant this settlement really is.
Absolutely.
So let's shift our focus now
Okay.
to Dubai
Right.
and some of the interesting things happening over there in the Middle East.
Let's go.
So BlackRock,
Yeah.
yeah, the financial giant,
Yeah.
and Emirates NBD.
Okay.
They've announced a pretty big partnership.
I'm listening.
So what's interesting here is that they're launching a new platform
Okay.
to provide access to private markets. They signed this memorandum of understanding
Mm-hmm.
to create this platform.
Yeah.
And it's specifically for Emirates NBD's wealth management clients.
Got it.
Now, this is tapping into a rapidly growing area,
Okay.
alternative investments,
Right.
which is basically anything that's not traditional stocks and bonds.
Yeah.
And this sector is projected to reach $30 trillion
Wow. 30 trillion.
by 2030.
That's huge.
So private markets have typically been hard for individual investors to get into.
Right. Yeah.
So what are we talking about here?
Yeah.
What kind of investments are they initially focusing on?
So initially, they're going to be focusing on private credit
Okay.
and what they call multi-alternatives,
Okay.
which is basically a diversified approach
Yeah.
to different kinds of alternative investments.
Okay.
But their long-term goal is to make all kinds of alternative assets
Wow.
available across the Middle East.
That's ambitious.
It is.
So BlackRock is bringing their expertise to the table,
Mm-hmm.
marketing, education, training, and their technology.
All their resources.
Yeah, so this could really open up opportunities for
Yeah.
investors who didn't have access to these types of investments before.
Democratize it a little bit.
Exactly. And it aligns with Emirates NBD's commitment to innovation
Yeah,
and to making their wealth management offerings better.
totally.
It also shows that there's a growing demand
Mm,
for these private market investments
for sure.
in the region.
Definitely.
So BlackRock is a powerhouse in this space.
They are.
$450 billion in alternative assets
Wow.
under management.
That's a lot of zeros.
And they have a global team of over 1,000 professionals.
Wow.
So they know what they're doing.
They're the real deal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they are the real deal.
Yeah.
And it seems like their goal is to bridge that gap
Mm-hmm.
between institutional investors
Yeah.
and individual investors.
Make it more accessible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this also strengthens Dubai's position
Definitely.
as a major hub for financial activity,
Yeah, a global financial hub.
especially for private markets. Now, do we have any indication if they might include other asset classes on this platform in the future?
Well, they have said that they want to broaden the platform
Okay.
to include all major alternative asset classes.
All right.
So considering all the institutional interest in
Mhm.
digital assets,
Yeah,
it's definitely possible that they could include cryptocurrencies at some point.
it's definitely something to watch.
Absolutely keep an eye on it.
Okay, so very interesting developments in Dubai.
Yeah.
Let's move on to our second piece of news from that region.
Okay.
DWF Labs has announced a new $250 million liquid fund.
250 million.
Yeah, so what's the goal with this new fund?
So this fund is specifically designed to fuel the next wave of growth
Okay.
in the Web3 ecosystem.
Okay.
They want to accelerate the development and adoption
Mhm.
of mid and large cap crypto projects.
Got it.
And they've been busy. They've already invested $1 billion
$1 billion.
in blockchain projects in the past 2 weeks. That's a lot of activity.
That is a lot of money.
Yeah.
So what's their strategy with this new fund?
Well, they've hinted at some major investments coming up,
Okay.
including 2 deals at $25 million
Okay.
and a massive $10 billion deal.
$10 billion.
$10 billion.
That seems like a lot.
It does seem like a lot. We might want to double check that.
Yeah.
But their typical investment will be between $10 and $15 million per project.
Okay.
And they're really focused on expanding the Web3 ecosystem
Okay.
and making crypto more useful in the real world.
Okay.
They're particularly interested in layer 1 and layer 2 networks
Okay.
and boosting DeFi activity.
So they're not just throwing money at these projects, are they?
No, they're not just writing checks.
What else are they doing?
They're providing tailored ecosystem strategies.
Okay.
They want to strengthen liquidity
Okay.
and DeFi activity on those layer 1 and layer 2
Got
networks.
it.
And they're also going to support the development of lending markets
Okay.
and financial infrastructure within Web3. And they're going to help these projects gain visibility through marketing and by connecting them with advisors.
Right.
And they're really focusing on community engagement
Okay.
and attracting new traders.
So this is a much more hands-on approach
It is.
than traditional venture capital.
Very much so.
It sounds like they're really trying to nurture the growth.
Yeah, they want to be active participants
Yeah.
in shaping the future of Web3.
And they're encouraging new projects with big ambitions.
If you want to make a difference, reach out to them.
Yeah.
They're looking for people who want to change the world.
So we've covered a lot today.
We have.
We've got GameStop getting into Bitcoin,
Yeah.
Fidelity maybe launching a stablecoin,
Potentially.
the SEC changing its approach with Immutable and Ripple,
Big shifts.
and huge institutional interest in investment in the Middle East.
Yeah. Dubai's on the map.
So what does all this mean?
Well, I think it shows that crypto and Web3 are maturing
Yeah.
and evolving really rapidly. And we're seeing more and more institutional adoption.
Right.
And a changing regulatory landscape.
It's a really exciting time.
It is.
So to wrap things up for you, our listeners,
Yeah.
think about this.
Okay.
With all these changes in regulation and all this institutional interest,
Yeah.
how do you think the balance of power is going to shift
Hmm.
in the crypto and Web3 ecosystems in the coming months?
Good question.
What new opportunities or challenges might we see
Yeah.
for individual investors like you
Right.
and for the wider adoption of these technologies?
Lots to think about.
There's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.
See ya.
We'll see you next time.